Hmm. Good. And we'll go ahead and open the meeting at 3:06. We'll ask if there are adjustments to the agenda. Hearing none, we'll move on to approving the prior meeting minutes of October 15th.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Then moved and seconded, we accept them as written. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Candace.
Okay, Candace, did you say Candace?
I did.
Then, great, okay, so they are approved. Go ahead, 6-0. Public comment from items not on the agenda. Hearing none, we will turn the floor over to not Scott, but Steve.
Why Scott's not here?
He is not.
No.
And he's not coming back, actually.
We scared him, huh?
Steve
Okay.
sent out, well, Kevin sent out because I missed the email, the revisions of options A and B.
Yeah, and maybe if I could just frame it
Sure,
for us. Yeah. So we are, as a committee, our job is to try to figure out the best option and plan to move forward here. And then at some point, we're gonna pull all our work together and then take it public and not sell it to people, but show us, advocate for why we think it's the best line of thinking, build public support for it, and assuming that is successful, we would then fundraise and try to pull it off. So we're at the sort of the beginning, not quite at the end of the beginning now, and we're trying to really, what this has really devolved into in the past 2 meetings is a choice between putting the addition on the left-hand side of the building or on the right-hand side of the building. And I think the 2 options are close enough where splitting hairs is probably not the right word for it, but it's really, it's kind of viable on both ends, and it comes down to one option maybe is a little less expensive, but not orders of magnitude less, and one option might be a little bit better for planning purposes and overall flow of the site, but not a lot better. And so we have to come to some consensus on which one that's gonna be and why. And I think there's some things for us to talk about. So I think that's how to sort of frame the discussion once we've let Steve sort of present his options that he's pulled together based on the feedback he received from the group at the last meeting. So I think a good way to proceed would be to let him show us what he's done. And before we try to fix what he's done in committee, let's understand what he's done and make sure everyone has the same common understanding of the relative merits of what he's saying. And then let's talk about the 2 schemes and try to ascertain if we think we have enough information to really move forward on one or the other. We've had a little bit of engagement from our civil engineer, not really as much as I would like, but we've had a little bit. We're certainly gonna need more as we move forward, but we've primarily had Steve as a resource for now. So Steve, I guess I would like to, at that point, maybe turn it over to you and let you walk us through these changes.
Sure. Is everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess just a couple of pre-comments to kind of introduce the 2 options and relative to the discussion from our last meeting. There were a couple things to point out. I think one of the things that I think most everyone agreed on was that there was room to make both of the options more space efficient and kind of trim them down relook at some of the circulation and really try to simplify as much as possible, to try to get that square footage of the additions down. So a couple of big moves that I made in this revision, to that end is, the big one is in looking at the bathrooms for the new addition, we had a little bit of a discussion about the code requirements. And when you have a big meeting room, you have to have a certain number of toilets to serve that, as well as the library. And I had initially been showing the entire needed bathroom count in the new addition. And as we went through the meeting last time, we said, you know, if we open up the library, why can't we use the library bathrooms to augment the community room bathrooms to save some space? So that's what I started to look at. But as I really dialed in on that issue, I came to the conclusion that the bathrooms in the existing library can actually be expanded to get 4 fixtures, 4 toilets for the women and 2 toilets, 2 urinals for the men, and still be accessible, which meets the entire need of the new community room. So essentially, these 2 revised schemes get rid of the new bathrooms altogether and rely on the renovated bathrooms in the library. That's a great savings of space for sure. And I think in terms of the way you use the building, I don't think it's there's a detriment in the sense of sometimes when you have a community room, you want to have it be standalone so that the rest of the building can be locked up. But it seems like that's not a huge issue for you guys, and it's a good way to save space and make the best use of what we have. So that's probably the biggest savings piece of the square footage. Another piece that factored into both of these revised schemes is the discussion that we had about future town offices. And, you know, whether they were a part of the short-term plan or a long-term plan. I think in the end, what we all agreed was that, you know, whatever moves we make and design decisions we make, we don't want to close the book on that potential, that even if those offices don't get incorporated on day one, we want to have a design concept that can accommodate those in the future. So in order to do that, I indicated that, you know, I really need to have some sense of reality in terms of how much space they would likely need, just so we have a sense of how big a beast that is. So John Spears, who was at the last meeting, volunteered to, you know, sort of take an inventory of what they have. And he sent me a great little spreadsheet that did a rundown of what the existing spaces were, made some commentary as to what he thought some of the shortcomings were. He was very careful to indicate that that was his opinion only, and then it hadn't been vetted in a further audience. But at least as a snapshot, it was helpful because, you know, he told me where he thought there were pinch points. And then he also pointed out that they have quite a large meeting room, which could be reduced to a smaller day-to-day room. And then for bigger meetings, they could use the new community space, which makes sense. So after factoring all that in, I got to about a 2,100 square feet of need for any future town offices. And what that told me was that there had been some talk that maybe the town offices could be kind of incorporated into the existing library footprint by taking over one of the existing spaces or possibly in the lower level. But I think the reality is that 2,100 square feet, it's of a size that would really kind of sort of take over too much of the library square footage and be too much of an impact for spaces that are already programmed for other uses. And the example I gave in my email, if you haven't read it, was that the 3 rooms that are facing the back of the site, so sort of one whole side of the building, is about 2,500 square feet, and the town offices seem to be needing about 2,100. So, you know, it would take almost half of the floor to do it based on their needs, as indicated. So that led me to the conclusion to say that if the town offices were to be incorporated, it would be a second edition. So we have option A that has the community room on the left and a potential future town office on the right, and then option B is vice versa with town offices on the left and community building on the right. And then probably the last big design factor that factored in was the discussion about to have an elevator or not to have an elevator. And in the original two schemes, option A, which was the addition on the left, I had taken an approach where the addition was sort of situated halfway between the two existing floor levels. And then I had a chair lift that would take you either up a half a level to the library or down a half a level to the lower level. The advantage of that was that there was one accessible entry for all, and that all levels of the building could be accessed with lifts, which are cheaper than elevators. The downside of that, as was pointed out, is that it was kind of space inefficient because it creates a lot of corridors. And people, I think, seem to think with the ramps and the stairs and the lifts that there was a lot of stuff to go through, and it didn't seem very kind of clearly planned and efficient, and kind of awkward. But it was an option to get you to all levels of the building without an elevator. Also last week, the option B which was the addition on the right-hand side, took the approach that we'll do an addition and set it at the main level of the library. So once you come in a new addition, you have, accessible direct access to the entire library in the community room. But then there's no elevator and no lifts. So if you want to go to the lower floor, you'd arrive at the lower entrance around back where there would be designated parking. So that option tried to solve the elevator by saying we have no internal connection between the floors, but that's not essential to the function of the building because people may just be coming for something downstairs or upstairs. But they have to rely on going to one entry or the other to get to those floors. And then if they did want to access different levels, they might have to get back in their car and go around to the other entrance to get to the upper level, which obviously is not ideal, but when you think about it, it's probably a very, very low percentage of people if we're talking about somebody who's disabled and also wanting to use both levels of the floor of the building. But doesn't meet the spirit of what ADA accessibility is supposed to be, which is sort of unique or universal and equal access for all. It's kind of a stretch to think that meets it, but nonetheless, those two were options to avoid the elevator. So we did talk a lot about that last time, and I'm not sure we got to the full consensus on to have one or not have one, but I took the initiative in this subsequent round to say, let's bite the bullet and accept that we really do need an elevator, or at least a Lula lift, which is a limited utility, limited application elevator, which is a cheaper version of a full commercial elevator. And really the biggest difference other than the cost is that it's a bit smaller. It's more of a kind of a single person lift and not, a normal elevator that's a little bit larger size. One of the arguments I tried to make in my head was to say that, with an elevator or a Lula, you can make the circulation a lot more efficient because everything is much simpler and clearer. You just have, one lift that takes you everywhere. So that space that you've saved, square footage, which has value to it, you could argue kind of that it helps to fund the elevator. So in a sense, you're getting all your functional needs met in a smaller addition with an elevator or Lula. That's probably a better long-term solution for a building for all. One other thing I forgot to point out too, just in the, trying to reduce things, I did drop the seating size of both schemes in the meeting room. Originally, I had 119 seats, so I took 10 seats out to bring it down to 109. So that's that. And then let me just quickly run through the lower levels, which for now are pretty much the same in both options. So again, in the schemes last time, I had not really addressed the existing big mechanical slash storage room that I guess was the former fire barn. I thought I'd heard that you still had some need for some pretty significant big item storage, and the fact that it was down at a floor level sunk another 2 feet below the rest of the lower level, which creates another accessibility issue. I had kind of thought initially that maybe that just stays the way it is, but I think I got pushed on that a little bit and thought, John was saying last time that, it's a very usable space with those big openings and potential for daylight access. So, let's really look at what could be done there. So in these new schemes, I do show that existing space being reused. I'm calling it a exercise studio, but it could be whatever. And showing the necessary ramp, which would be a 24-foot long ramp plus a 5-foot landing on one side of the space to get you down into the building or into the space. And then because of the way it's situated at one end of the building and its access to potential fire exits, and this room would need 2 exits directly serving that room based on its size. So you'll see that I have basically 2 doors into the space. One goes directly to the outside and it needs a little stair to get up and out. And the other one is up the ramp and then over either to the left or to the right, depending on what addition option to access the new fire exit stair. And then at the back of that space, just showing some utility. We know the electrical comes in on that corner and we have water service and sprinklers to deal with. So I just kind of put some, utility spaces there to kind of limit the depth and the distance from where the glass walls are for outside light. And then on the right side of the lower level, I got rid of the maker space, which I was told needs really to have daylight, so it's probably better suited to stay upstairs. So I made a fairly large storage room adjacent to the kitchen that could help for storage of kitchen related type things and supplies, as well as general storage needs. 2 single toilet shower rooms, and additional storage and mechanical space. And then in the front of that, a large main space down there, which would be the recreation slash multi-purpose space at 2,300 square feet. There had been expressed a need for showers for the scenario when the building might sometimes be a warming shelter. From an accessibility standpoint, it's more space efficient to create an accessible bathroom with an accessible shower in it than it is to have accessible bathrooms with separate accessible showers. If you do separate rooms for the showers and the bathrooms, it ends up taking more space. So this seemed like a good compromise to give you the toilets for day to day, and for maybe some people that go to an exercise thing or whatever who want to take a shower there. And then it also gives you that functionality for shelter. And then basically rounding that off on option A at the basement level, the lower level on the left-hand side is the fire exit stair and a lift that gets you up to the other level. And on option B, that same kind of idea is on the right-hand side with the access to a stair and an elevator to get you up. So those are the buildings themselves, and I'll just touch quickly on the site plans for the 2 of them. I'm hoping this is big enough for people to see, but side by side. So starting with option A now, because I made the mental leap of saying just go with an elevator, it's no longer situated halfway between the 2 floor levels. Instead, it's sited level with the main floor of the library. And what that means on that side of the site with all the falling grade is that you have to enter that addition on the front. I have a little red, those red triangles represent the different entry points into the building. And it's going to probably require some retaining walls and some grading issues there to get both regular access and then the accessible access, which would really have to pretty much come off of the circular drive area because that's kind of the plateau flat area of the site. Still allows for the lower entry into the lower level around back. At this point, I basically made the parking of the two schemes the same. And the idea is just as a planning exercise to say, you know, we might be able to improve on that a little bit here and there, or do it a little differently with Will's input, but basically it's 45 spaces comfortably on the site. And if you all decide that, you know, you only want to build 20 of those and have an overflow area that's, you know, just gravel or just grass, or you decide to make that connection to sharing with the church, this should really just be seen as one option of, you know, if you were trying to max out parking, you know, this is probably about as good as we're going to do and still have it be comfortable. And then staying with option A, it shows a future town office addition on the right-hand side with 4 accessible parking spaces adjacent to it. And I've indicated I'm sure you can't see it on the screen, but it's about 41 feet from the property line to the neighbor. So I feel like that's a very comfortable distance and shouldn't cause any concern from those neighbors. It's probably at least double what a typical setback would be on a side yard. So if we jump over to the right-hand side, option B is where the main addition is on the right, and then the town offices are on the left. The site implications are pretty much the same. The town offices would still need to be accessed off of the circular drive for accessibility. And it would require some retaining walls to manage the grade drop off there. And then the community room would be on the right-hand side. And that would result in a little bit tighter to the property line at about 28 feet 6. So that's about whatever 13 feet or so closer to the line than option A. But again, it would have some handicap parking spaces right there for easy access. And then the last thing both of these tries to do is, you know, I think we could create a new sort of entry plaza at the front of the library that incorporates the existing lobby entrance as well as the new addition to the right. To give it some unification, to feel like when you arrive at the building, you get dropped off kind of at one spot and then you can, you know, decide where you're going instead of having very separate entrances and being, I think it just helps to kind of unify that arrival point. And that's achievable with both schemes. So I think that's it in a nutshell. I think we've succeeded in getting the space down size-wise. The vertical circulation needs further discussion. And I think, as Kevin pointed out, both options are very viable with not a huge differential in cost one way or the other. And if you did do the town offices, you're going to end up with an addition on both sides either way. So I've talked enough for a few minutes, so I'll let you guys talk.
Okay, thanks, Steve.
Yep.
Okay, so I think what I think makes sense is for us to ask Steve any clarifying questions first about the schemes and then get into discussing the merits and the comments on them. One thing I'd like to point out and reiterate, I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting regarding the town offices. I don't want us to get, because we're at the design phase of the project where there are almost too many factors in play and we've got everything pulled together and the mission looks like it's going in different directions and that's natural and that's okay. But we also need to get back to what our original charge is. And we had a nice clarifying email exchange with the town and John, who's here, about what exactly our mission should be with respect to those town offices. And what we clarified and decided was that we weren't designing them now, we weren't necessarily even planning for them now, but we were asked to consider what if someday the town offices might want to move there. Let's try not to make a move here that would foreclose that out.
Mhm.
And I think what I've gotten out of this discussion is that nothing we're considering forecloses that out because you just would be tacking it on the other end anyway, most likely. So I think that we can almost dispense with that part of it and not get too hung up on it. It's fair game for discussion, comment and whatever, but I don't think it's a driver of what we're supposed to be doing as a committee. So with that one caveat, I'd like to turn it over to the committee for clarifying questions to Steve. And maybe first on Zoom and then here in person, and then we can go into a discussion. Anything from Zoom for clarifying questions for Steve, from Michael, John, or Candace?
To me, it's very clear what he has explained, and thank you very much for taking the time to make it that easy to understand. I have a couple of questions that I think are off topic for that. So I will table my concerns until later. Thank you.
John or
Hi,
Michael?
John.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
So placing the, can you hear me okay? All that?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Using the bathrooms was a brilliant idea. It saved a lot of space, kept everything on the one floor. And I agree with Kevin that our mission is the community center. There are good options for the town offices. I do think that there is a cost factor for the addition in the A position related to its elevation. It's being set.
Right now, we're doing questions right now, and then we're gonna talk about all that.
It's a comment about the placement and its cost, whereas with,
Right, John,
if we're.
John, we're trying to do questions now so we can all get to a common understanding, and then we're all gonna comment on it after we ask all the questions we need to ask.
My question then is, what is the cost difference between the two A and B plans?
Okay, thank you.
And if you're looking for me to answer, I don't know. All I can say is I agree with you in the sense that gut feeling, obviously the A positioning is gonna be more, more involved with grade, but we're gonna have to dive into it a little bit more, hopefully with Will's guidance to get it, if we need to get, dial that in more cost wise.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, I think it's a little more expensive. Like, to me, it feels like it's a couple $100,000 more, just wild ass guess. What do you think, John?
One of my question is, what will it look like if it's elevated at where the grade falls off? I believe that it will expose a lot of foundation.
On the back side, you're right.
Yes.
Okay. Michael, did you have any questions?
Bonsoir, mes amis. You would think that France is a first world country, but I can attest that in the last 48 hours that not to be true. I'm sorry I'm late, and having come late to the party, I don't have any questions at this moment.
Okay. Now with that, I'd like to turn it over to the folks that are here in person. Any clarifying questions for Steve?
If I could go first, because mine was about option A, and that was what would be under that main floor level.
Mm.
There'd be storage under there.
It'd be unexcavated, I believe.
Yeah, it'd be
Plan.
unexcavated. So, toward the front of the addition facing the street, it would essentially just be a slab on grade with typical foundation walls going down 4 or 5 feet. But then as the existing grade drops off, as John pointed out, the assumption at this point is that it would still just be slab on grade, but you're going to end up having taller walls back in there. Just kind of like the way it works with the back of the building now. We could build that up with some sort of berming and some retaining walls to try to minimize that. But that is an issue with that side, that'll be a taller foundation. But the idea was that it was just all unexcavated. That said, there's probably an opportunity to capture that space if you wanted to for utilitarian storage, but that is gonna increase construction costs further to have more, usable space.
Any other questions?
Well, I'm worried about the storage available in the building on the lower level. That's reduced significantly, so that's why I wanted to ask about option A,
Okay,
but that was it about the.
other questions clarifying?
Could that addition on A be put on pilings of some sort, so it's more open, so that it could be storage or?
You can do anything with money.
Well, that'd be more expensive to do it?
Yes.
Okay,
And so, it's a question of, I think something like that is probably one of the second order questions, maybe not quite a first order question. It's
Okay.
important, but it's not as important as getting something that's feasible that we all have buy-in on.
Okay.
Other,
My other question is, on the option A or B, either one, the recreation room is 2,300 square feet.
Mhm.
And our additions are 29, and I don't have the other one right in front of me.
Just over 3,000, yep.
Could we somehow juggle the downstairs so that we have that same square footage without putting an addition on?
that's been an idea that crops up every once in a while. That's the cost conscious, good old Maine, this thing to do. But I don't think that, my take on the whole thing is that has never quite captured the energy of anyone as if that's an okay place to have the town meeting, even if we can make it up to code, which has been some talk about.
Yeah.
I just haven't felt that there's been support for that being it's the
I'm just
cheapest way to
wondering,
get
yeah.
town meeting on the site of all the options we've talked about, I think, but I don't think anybody really likes it.
Well, I don't know that I do either, but I'm just asking the question.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. But it doesn't seem to have captured the imagination of the powers that be and whoever they are.
Right.
But, I don't know if this is a question, but I think we kind of seem to be straying away from the town's vote, which is what the town voted for, was to save the building. So and I think the addition is great, maybe down the road, but as of right now, we don't have any money. So can we go in steps and stages to get, what is it gonna cost to save this building structurally?
Yeah, part of it is you're right, in terms of construction phasing and money raising, you're probably going in that direction. But in our design and decision process, we're kind of coming to that solution a little bit backwards because we're,
Okay,
if you look at what Steve's gonna do for us, his scope of services, it
Mhm.
includes an evaluation of the existing building in terms of insulation and roof and mechanicals and different things he's gonna look at.
mhm.
We haven't even talked about that yet, because we've been hung up
No.
on which
The
end of the
addition
building the
and which
addition might
end,
go
yeah.
on. I think once we kind of get that roughed out, I think then the next thing will be, okay, Steve, can you do that other stuff? And then whether or not in what order money is raised for which things is a whole different topic, but we're gonna definitely look at the whole thing.
So we're looking at how long? Couple of years, 3 years?
To do what?
To do anything without raising the money. If we have to raise the money first, and then if we go in stages first, most places like to have their money up front.
Right. Well, I think, the short answer,
Don't know
But,
what the stages look like yet.
but the point, to answer her question, succinctly, is that there's absolutely no reason why it couldn't be phased in this kind of approach, because the additions are off to the sides. The internal renovations, it's really, focused on the bathrooms that don't really have to be renovated until the community room comes online. And the downstairs is basically just kind of fitting up space that's pretty much not used now. So I could absolutely see phase one is get the existing building up to snuff, address the roof, the the windows, the insulation, and all of that stuff. It's very cleanly broken out. And then say phase 2 is this addition, phase 3 is the other addition maybe. So totally could be done that way, definitely.
That, perfect, that's a great answer too.
Questions?
No, I pretty much what Lynn was talking about, and he just answered mine, so I'm good.
I've got just one, Steve, and on option A, is there any, and I know there's a power pole out there and looks like a generator, maybe, but is there any reason why option A is as back as far as it is? Because the grade does fall away toward the rear of the site. And if option A were pulled forward, I think a lot of the grade difference or a good chunk of it might go away. Do you have other constraints there other than maybe the drive aisle that you're looking at that cause you to push it so far back?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. The main reason I pushed it back was to avoid the relocating the generator, the electrical service, the tanks, all that stuff there. It's not ideal to have it there in the front of the building anyway, but trying to be cost conscious. And then also just trying to keep circulation simple. It seems like, the new circulation wants to kind of tie in as directly as possible to the existing corridor. So that means the meeting room has to either go on the back side of that or the front side. And, it might be worth trying that, or even having a little jog to try to get the meeting room toward the front, to see if that would, avoid some of that drop off.
I think for planning purposes, we kind of have what we need for the rough cut here.
Mhm.
So I was just curious.
Yeah.
Okay, if those are the questions, now I think it makes sense to start the part we've all been waiting for, which is the debate.
Tear it
So-
apart.
So I don't know, would we like to start on Zoom again, or how would we like to do this? I'd like to hear a little bit from everyone, but I know there are some opinions out there. Candace, do you want to go first?
Sure. I feel a bit remiss in the fact that for some reason or other, I did not realize that we were entertaining an addition to the existing building. I thought we were going to try to be as succinct as possible in using the building. So I can, after your statement about people saying that they were uncomfortable in the lower level with the meeting hall, I understand that now. So I guess that's the main thrust there. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And so then I'm going to move on to something else, and don't throw anything at me. I'm glad I'm over here. What if we considered having the addition where the meeting room was on level with the library, and then the underneath space would be made eventually into town hall space?
So, yeah, I can answer that pretty quickly, I think. One of the things that I wrote in my email, if you all saw it, was I kind of did a little narrative on the existing basement and saying that when you have a space like that that's half embedded in the ground and you've only got natural light on one side, it's still quite workable and usable space for big, large things like a big multi-purpose room or a big exercise room or whatever. But to try to take space like that and turn it into something that's much more partitioned, like an office building that has individual offices and conference rooms and a reception area and those sort of things, when it gets that chopped up, those rooms that fall to one side are going to lose the natural light, and you're going to
Oh, yes.
with rooms with no windows. So whether we tried to do that in the existing basement or say take the new option A, where John had pointed out we're going to have tall foundations, you could make a basement under there, but it's going to have the same problem. It's only going to have daylight on one side. So
Okay, thank
Go
you.
ahead, John.
Okay. I once had a very nice office in a basement. And, but Steve, you've done some good work here, and I'm asking you whether or not you could excavate the the northerly corner of the end under option A addition. Could you excavate that, make a nice patio with windows for basically half of, until you get to the beam, such that that space, as Candace has asked, and I believe Marcia was also going there, that space is about 2,100 square feet in total. I would ask if you could raise the floor by 1 foot or 2 feet so that you had about a 10-foot ceiling with windows on 2 sides, full glass. And I would also suggest that we could cut the wall opposite the kitchen or in the bigger area and provide a areaway light well into that area stronger than what exists. So I don't know, did you follow me about cutting the corner, excavating the hill a little bit right there as you're pointing?
In here,
Yes,
yes, on the outside.
right.
So in an option where the addition is over, like option B, the addition is over here, but then also get in here and open this up some and regrade it so that you can get more glass in.
More light in there, and so that we don't have what Kevin called mission creep. And I think we're seriously there with the 2 additions, with the town and the community center. It's getting big. There's a lot of space, and we should utilize, as several people have pointed out, the existing building as much as possible. Make it suitable for different functions.
Right, for the small town.
I think we have enough mission creep even without the town office discussion. And what I tried to say at the beginning was kind of put a pin in that and say, we're not here to consider a town office.
Right.
I agree, Kevin, but we could make a space that in the future is adaptable without, actually phasing a project is very, very difficult from a financing standpoint. You need to get all the money to begin with to do what you want to do. It's not going to come in dribs and drabs.
It's also never cheaper than today. Tomorrow is more expensive than today.
Correct.
Yes.
So,
Well, I think that's absolutely. I mean, if you said, okay, let's go with option B, which is an addition now or in the future, but we still have left multiple options in the future for accommodating offices. We could peel back that grade, as you're saying, make a little terrace. We might, if we did that too, we might even be able to find a way to get into that space at the lower level without having to do that inside ramp. If we had some of that outdoor space to work with, a patio area and work with the grades.
we do need the topo information in order to make any of these decisions, frankly.
Right, we do have some, John put together based on LiDAR that's available online, kind of a preliminary 2-foot interval contours, but there's a lot to be considered that it's beyond my ability to look at drainage and surface runoff and all that, so it really needs somebody with an eye for that. But I think, yeah, John, you're right, that's definitely a way to maximize the flexibility and usability of that space.
And it doesn't have to be for the town office. We want to make usable space.
Right.
But that's inviting, and that has been the chief objection to the lower level.
Yep.
Yeah, and so my thought is that we have, like I said, I think we have a little mission creep going on right now because we're still considering kind of all the ideas. The town office is, I think, the most emblematic of that. But even after we kind of net that out, and if we say we're not considering that, I still, I'm thinking about cost the whole time, and I think we need to try to end up somewhere in that $4-ish million range where we thought that other plan might be coming through once its 2019 numbers have been escalated to 2024 numbers. And I think we have the bones of maybe achieving that, but I'm a little concerned with either scheme having an elevator. I think it's a more gracious project with an elevator. I don't know that our budget should be trying to include it. So that's one thing that one concern that I have. Other than that, I agree, option B is probably a little bit cheaper than option A. To me, it's like $250,000, but I don't know. I do think option A is a little bit of a better design than option B mainly because it works better for the parking lot. John does make some convincing points about if you ever want to use that space that's labeled exercise studio that I've been in, and I think it's a long way from being even an exercise studio. I think it's a long way from being anything other than, what it is now. But, he is right, that if you ever wanted to use that space potentially in any meaningful way, you're probably better off putting the addition on the right-hand side. So, to me, the decision I'm making in my head is, do I want a little bit less cost or a little bit more design? But everyone else might not feel the same way about the design that I do. I think it is relatively clear that option B will probably be a little more affordable and maybe has a little bit less going on in terms of cost. Now, we haven't, like I said at the beginning of the meeting, we haven't had quite as much engagement with the civil as I would like. I'm getting the sense that he's super busy and hasn't really dedicated a lot of energy to us. And we also had kind of mandate not spend much money on him, which is sort of goes with that.
Exactly.
So at some point, we may, before we get too far down the road, we may, even if we're not using full topo and drainage information and utility sizings to make our decision, we're gonna wanna verify that stuff that he holds the key to before we get very far down the road. So I'm really okay with either option. To me, it's a little bit cheaper on the right, a little bit nicer on the left, but I think both options, the elevator does concern me, and I'm interested to hear from the committee how important we feel like that internal, fully accessible thing is. Steve made a good point about, on one of our calls, about the, if the kitchen ever becomes usable again in the basement, to not have an elevator for that kitchen to bring up food to upper levels may potentially be a problem, and it's a good point, but, I'm just afraid we're gonna get to the finish line and we're gonna throw it out for cost estimating, and we're gonna have everything in it that we think we want and is good, and it's gonna come back and it's gonna be $7 million. And they're gonna be, see, I told you those people didn't know what they were doing, you know? And I think we need to avoid that and be conscious of that, because we're trying to build a consensus between saving the building and having a new space and having something nice and not overspending the money that we can raise. And we're on that knife edge all the time. I think we need to be conscious of the people who are at the table and who aren't at the table who have expressed opinions. That's kind of my overall thought about the thing. But I think the committee needs to grapple with which end it should go on, and I hope that's helpful in framing it.
It is.
Very well said. That was
Just to specifically address your fear of getting food upstairs. We have all of this space down here why wouldn't we have dinners on the lower level? And there's also a little kitchenette upstairs if we want to serve coffee during town meeting or
But
something.
if we had that, would we need the elevator?
No, that's what I'm saying. That's.
But you have to have that for ADA.
No,
Not
so,
if we play with the entrances a bit.
right, as long as we, the thing that's unique about this building is that the functions on the lower level and the functions on the top level, they could almost be run by two organizations. You could rent out the lower level to Exercise as us or whatever, and they could operate totally independently. So the nature of the building is that it's not essential to travel between the two floors internally. So if we got rid of the elevator in these latest schemes, it would mean relying on a lower back accessible entrance that accesses the lower level, and that, that's it. So if one person wants to do something in the lower level and then go up to the upper level, they got to go around to the other entrance. Is it ideal? No. Is it really, really in the spirit of ADA? Probably no, but it is allowable in this case.
Is
I
it
think.
legal? Yes.
Yeah, it's compliant, but yeah.
Interesting, interesting.
And, I mean, to John's point, maybe whittling it back and phasing and doing all that stuff's not such a great idea, but I have seen buildings that get built with a planned space for an elevator shaft and they don't put it in. But then at least it's there for the future if you decide, yeah, we really should do that.
Yeah.
Could we think about doing that?
I think so.
Where would
Down-
that, where would you think that would go?
Well, I think it would go where it's currently planned if we go with one
Oh.
of the revised options. It just, you know, the expense is in the elevator itself. And, you know, so instead of a $250,000 elevator, maybe you're spending, I don't know, 50 or 75 on a shaft for the future or something, you know.
Mhm.
Upkeep of the elevator.
Yeah, elevator maintenance contracts aren't cheap. You have to have a phone line, dedicated phone line for it. Spare amount of electricity. It's it's
Costly.
several $1,000s a year to own an elevator. Anyway,
I have a dumbwaiter in my house and I've had one of them. I do.
What's his name?
Marsha. We didn't put electricity to it because we put it in when there was a big ice storm. So to get wood up to the fireplace.
Yes, yeah.
Great idea.
Yeah, so
Good
I-
exercise.
would this be the only elevator in the town of South Thomason? If there
I
is one?
think so.
That kind of tells me something, you know? If we're gonna do the first one in town, we ought to really be convinced. You know?
What about the dumb waiter that goes from the downstairs kitchen to the upstairs kitchenette? You know, you could
Yeah,
have
so,
some way to
yeah,
do it.
I was just gonna say that there's a church here in Portland that I used to go to and they had the rectory behind the church and the kitchen was down below and that's exactly what they had. And sometimes when you had the kids there helping, you know, set up for coffee hour or something, they thought it would be, my son included, thought it would be fun because it's not electric, it was the rope thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So they would jump in there and get on it and go down, you know. So
Woo-hoo.
you can, yeah.
Me
definitely.
too.
If we're trading $200,000 from A to B, B, that would allow for the elevator and some maintenance, but totally share the need to not overbuild and be fine with just putting in a shaft and but saving any foundation costs of the A plan to give more flexibility for the improving the lower level.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that either. If it was my building, I might push hard to try to put it on the left just because I believe in the planning aspects of it, but I am convinced that probably our easiest, cleanest path to satisfying the letter of our
Mission.
thing as a
yeah.
committee is probably to slap it on the right-hand side and call it a day. I think that as you all are walking in the winter from the parking lot to that hall, you might be, well, you can walk through the building too.
I'd like to speak to the usability of the storage areas and, you know, that does involve getting books up and down the stairs. Stairs are fine. But in Plan B, they are at the opposite end of the library. So running down to fiction storage is, you know, a lot easier in option A. And, so that was one thing that pops out to me between A and B. I do realize B would be easier, but maybe that's something to be saved for town office because it
Yeah.
would be easier someday. I guess I have to go out and look at the floor level out there because as I, you know, seen it in my head, you come up that long ramp and you go up 3 steps and then you're at the main level. And so it seems like there's a lot of room under that floor level.
Which ramp are you talking about?
Well, the
Um, just in
original
case
option A.
From the,
Oh, yeah.
from the parking lot into the
Yeah.
end of the building.
Yeah.
Which is a well-used entrance. But as far as moving books downstairs, taking stuff to the dishwasher. I like the idea of the stairway closer to the library than way off on the other end. I like the stairs where they are, but I realize those would have to go to accommodate the expanded bathrooms. So. And the storage on the lower level, you know, we have had 964, 84, whatever, 24 by 36 equals. That's what we had in the old library, and that was it wasn't enough then. And so I'm not sure how much square footage you're allowing for in the renovation of the lower level, but it strikes me as it might not be enough. For, we have canopies and tables and chairs and, you know, big ticket items that don't get used a lot. We have the tennis ball or tennis nets and benches and various things that end up here. Right now we have the voting booths here. There are a lot of items that need to be stored for, you know, infrequent use that I don't.
So that's sort of a floor plan concern
Yeah,
as opposed to an A or B concern, right? Like a
Mhm.
future.
yes, well, that's why I was wondering if there would be storage under part of the A
Yeah, I mean,
plan.
correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but the lower level under the main structure where you have rec room 2300, a couple storage rooms and a mechanical room and some toilets, along with the kitchen, it's not like you've necessarily programmed that space more than just sort of squared it off and put some labels on some rooms for now.
Right, yeah, I don't really have a good sense of, you know, often what happens when one talks about storage is that the bigger the storage gets, the more stuff shows up to fill it.
Yeah.
So, but just hearing Penny describe it there, that it sounds like you have things that are, you know, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, a library needs book storage, but I wouldn't have thought of, you know, voting booths and things
Mm.
that, tennis equipment and, you know, who knows what. So I think that is, you know, that is an important thing to think about. I mean, if we're being frugal, I guess, you know, while there is potential use in that space that I called exercise studio, and that we, you know, we've sort of shown that it could be turned into something that is definitely, you know, could be a nice space. Do you really need a 1,500 square foot exercise studio on top of a 2,300 square foot recreation room and whatever the community room is? And in the short run, does it make sense for that to continue to be storage, or mostly storage, and have a smaller little studio for yoga class or something? If the
Well,
if the
I
storage
think the best
Right.
to deal with this concern is to set it aside for when we're talking about the existing building,
Mhm.
which is probably next month. Rather than try to figure out storage this month. And if we could stay focused on A or B, I think that would be most helpful for trying to move the committee forward. John?
Okay, in both of these schemes, the kitchen is in the basement. And without an elevator, that is an ADA violation as far as I can tell. You cannot be serving food in the community room without an access. And if we have a budget, we will always have budget constraints, and we should definitely go, in my opinion, with option B, because it appears to have a lower cost. We all, I think, believe it has a lower cost, which could help cover the elevator cost, which would give us dual access to the kitchen. Otherwise, we're adding a kitchen to the meeting room, the addition.
Steve, do you think we need ADA to use the kitchen? Do we think we need ADA inside the building to use the kitchen legally?
Yeah, I'm not following that, because I think, it's a logistics issue of being able to shuttle food up there, but I don't see why you need an accessible connection between the space you're serving and the kitchen, because the public isn't going to the kitchen, so it's a work area.
And
And
a
if-
lot of helpful programs for disabled or whatever involve food preparation and work in a kitchen, washing dishes, whatever. And that's absolutely ADA requirement.
Right, and access to the kitchen would be accessible because you could, employees could go to the back entrance and go to work in the kitchen at the lower level. It's just.
But they can't deliver food up to the meeting room.
But there's no, I mean, that's a mythical, there's no actual program, we're not hiring,
Having
we're
food.
not hiring handicapped people to run the kitchen. I mean, that's just,
Well,
Yeah, that,
it doesn't exist.
mm-mm.
Yeah,
But just to state it so that people realize is that the ADA is not a code, it's a law. So what you end up
Correct.
doing on day one is one interpretation, but then if somebody in a wheelchair comes here and says, I want to work in the kitchen and I want to deliver the sandwiches to the people upstairs, and they make a case out of it and they decide to sue you, that is their purview to do that. And you have to, it's an issue of risk mitigation in terms of how you analyze what's required and what's not.
In addition to that, I would say it's a issue of community involvement and support.
Mhm.
well, we have this huge recreation multipurpose room on the first floor. That could very well be where food is served. Presently, we're doing it in what we're calling the community room. But there's no,
And it
nothing
works
that's,
fine.
it
But
works
we're
fine,
bringing it from home, we're not.
Yeah.
right,
Using.
right.
Cooking in the kitchen.
So, but if we wanna start cooking for people, there's no reason we couldn't serve on this lower level. I don't think, I mean,
Well, I
I
thought
don't
that,
wanna
I thought that
start
was the
cooking
whole
for people.
point, when we renovate the basement, it's a usable space,
Right.
kitchen, everything. We'll
Right,
eat
so-
down there, do
Yeah, so
do
that's-
programming
yeah.
down there. So
Right.
I'm missing the issue here, guys.
yeah.
I am
I-
too.
I
I think we
would
talked
tend
a
to
lot
agree.
about
I think
this.
we gotta keep it simple.
Yeah, let's move on here.
Yeah. Eat
Sorry.
downstairs.
So,
I think,
If, if I may interject saying that if we can't get to consensus on elevator, not elevator, maybe a reasonable compromise that everybody can sign on to is allocating the space for it. So it's not an immediate expense. And if down the road, as we get into it more deeper, and the community gets more involved and people say, what, no elevator? We can say, we got a place for the elevator.
Perfect.
let's try to come to consensus on A or B, and then let's try to come to consensus on elevator, no elevator, and see how far we get. I think we're making some progress here, but we are, we're
Swerving.
we're staying on the track, but we're not taking the direct route, which is fine, which is a good committee process, but let's go back to, there's some folks we haven't heard from on A or B. You guys had a chance to ask questions, but you haven't had a chance to express opinions and thoughts here at the table.
From everything comments that I'm hearing, I think A is probably our best bet.
Okay.
And I would just put in a thing for electric dumbwaiter.
Okay.
Okay, so that compromises the ropes. And the shaft is there for the elevator if we wanna do it later. In the meanwhile, it's the dumbwaiter.
So just to be clear, you're saying A, you meant the left-hand side scheme, not the right-hand
Yeah,
side?
yes.
Yeah, okay.
So you want the addition, you like the addition on the left-hand side?
Yeah.
Okay.
I wanted to make sure I was looking at the right one.
I still like B. I like the addition on this side of it. I just. And I think that, like I said, like I just expressed before, we're gonna renovate the whole downstairs, so it's usable. Storage, you can do whatever we want down there as far as with the kitchen. That's why I brought up the space where the fire trucks and stuff used to be, because we're not using that right now. I mean, that's a huge part of the building that isn't gonna be used if we don't do something with that. So, I mean, we're taking out a good part of that,
Except for storage.
but, right, but I mean. You could, so you're storing books down there right now, right? in that space,
And
and whatever else, your tables and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So you're saying you still need more space in addition to that?
No, these plans show it as an exercise area,
Oh,
and so we would be losing that storage space. If, but that's a renovation thing, so. That's, I just see, by these plans, we need more storage. I favor A because it just puts the library in the center of things, and we are basically a volunteer-run facility, and I see it more feasible.
it's easier to manage.
But I could go with B if we had a stairwell such as exists now that didn't require, such a long walk to go down and get a book from fiction storage.
So I think a lot of what we're hearing is the reflection that this is a hard decision because they both kind of work. So
Yeah,
it's
they
tough,
both kind of
you
work.
know? So Lynn, what do you?
So, I wanna, consider the neighbors as well. So in option A, it's 41 feet from neighbors.
No, I think that was the parking lot.
No, you're right, 41 feet for but that's only in option A, that's if a town office gets built there. So on day one, there's probably no
Close.
change to the existing
No.
conditions over there.
So,
I think you,
Talking about
Isn't-
the southern neighbors we talking about?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
Which neighbors you talking about?
well, I'm just looking at what he said earlier, the option A was 41 feet from the neighbors.
if the town.
if the
built
town office gets built.
For the addition,
Yeah.
yes.
For the town.
Yes.
If option B, where we got, is that 28?
28,
20.6.
28, yeah, that's also way more comfortable than a typical side setback, so I don't think it's unreasonable, whether the neighbors see it that way. I don't know what your relationship is and all of that, but it's,
Well, I think either side is gonna be fine, but I'm more concerned about this side than. I think both of them would work fine. Both option A and B. So I really don't have a preference. What?
Well, so do I, but I hear Kevin saying, come on.
Well,
we
we
got to
do have,
find-"
Well-
we have to pick a direction.
Right.
Well,
and
that-
also, just to quickly circle back on the basement, both of these schemes right now, the basement is being treated pretty much the same way, so the discussion of whether the exercise studio stays storage or becomes exercise, that issue is really the same in both options.
Well, I mean, the exercise is at the church now, but what other exercise?
Well,
You're talking about moving
I
the
for,
exercise here?
if we were to move, which I know the church is depending on us now
Mhm.
for the money that we contribute. I see that happening in the larger area.
Yes,
Would have, yeah, for
and that was gonna be my
We
question.
require quite a space for
exercise, yeah.
25
Mhm.
people.
Yep.
up
And that
in
grows
the-
all the time, so.
And Steve had briefly mentioned that exercise studio in NA could possibly be divided. What does a typical exercise room in a public facility, how big is it usually?
It totally depends on your market and how many
Yeah.
people you're
Mhm.
trying to serve.
Yeah.
You can have 7 treadmills or 2.
Equipment and all
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
which I don't think,
We're not gonna, I mean,
We'll do
this
that,
is a small town, we're probably not gonna have 7 treadmills. but,
no.
And that's on the bottom floor, right? That you're talking
Yeah.
about the studio, okay.
Yeah. And so the bottom floor doesn't change in either one, A or B, so it's
No,
more.
not really, no,
Wh-
the,
So what should we focus on to make a decision?
well, to me, the things that I've heard is, and think, is that option B is probably a little less money,
Mhm.
and option B leaves a little more flexibility to the far left space in terms of future options, because you're not tacking a building on the end of it,
Right.
which is the point 2 people have made. Option A, I think, gives you a little bit better access to the parking lot. And it gives Penny better sort of programming circulation from hey, I'm the one gonna be stuck with this thing, I'm running it type of argument. So we sort of, those are the things that have sort of risen up that are sort of irrefutable on each side, I think, that aren't a question of opinion. They seem to be fact for us. Michael, I know you're in Paris and you're late to the party, but you do have a voice here and
He loves the France.
we're close. So what do you think about these two options?
It's not Paris, but halfway down the road. I think that the views that have now been expressed that you have just summarized are really the primary issues. I personally prefer option B if we can address Penny's concern about A, storage, and B, mileage in terms of getting things from one place to another. But not to the point that I wouldn't be reasonably happy with option A. I think option A clearly is a more difficult design and build issue. And I think we can anticipate some unexpected issues with getting that done. And kind of that's where I am. I'm not trying to not make a decision. I'm trying to express where I see us at the moment and where my own feelings are.
Okay. Now, Candace, did you have a clear preference at this point? Were you?
I honestly, no, either one would work, but I'm thinking about lots of things. And one of the things that I think about is the future of the town office and looking at the fluidity of the use of the main thoroughfare, which is be the library and whatnot. And option B comes to mind for that.
Can you clarify what you mean by that?
Well, I was thinking that, you know, the main thoroughfare, which would be the library and the makerspace and all that, and then this is option B, with the large space for the meetings, seems to be concise for the a high level of activities, whereas the town office, when in the future, when that's built on, that would be somewhat, it looks somewhat separate. So I'm looking at option B for that.
I mean, I think I heard the other day, when we were discussing that, I don't know if it was John Spears or who, but there was some back and forth as to how connected that should be. And is it better? He was talking about that they do have some security functions. They keep money there. They have a vault. And that maybe it is better for that to be kind of its own sort of standalone thing. But
Interesting.
Well, it's also outside our scope to dig too far into where the town hall might keep its money when we're not
Yeah.
designing a town hall.
Right.
and I would say too, going back to Penny's comment, which is, you know, I totally understand. I do think that with either scheme that we pick, as I said, the basement layout, the lower level is similar, and we could work through that and say, okay, if we're on option B and we're gonna ideally have a stair over on that end, you know, does it make sense to rejigger this lower level a little bit and get some more storage closer to that stair, or maybe figure out how to get another stair within the footprint that goes down to the storage? But probably paramount to that, step one is for me to get a better handle on seeing exactly what you have for current storage. And maybe there's a way to kind of classify it differently and divvy it up so that things that are essential to the kind of day-to-day operations of the library are more accessible and easy, AKA books and things like that. And then some of the bulkier items maybe are more remote with, you know, somehow some more direct access to the outside. That's the other thing that concerns me, is that right now, you have that big storage space that is huge, so you can put whatever the heck you want into it, but then you also have, I think one of the overhead doors is still there, isn't it? Or at least you have a set of doors directly adjacent so that any stuff that's more outdoor stuff, play equipment or whatever, has an easy way in and out. So I do think that that's solvable if we kind of analyze that more carefully. And maybe you reach some conclusion that some of this outside stuff that isn't library essential should be, the town should store it somewhere else or something. I don't know.
I have a
All right,
question.
so back to Candace, and John has a hand up too, but Candace, I just wanna to push you a little bit on, are you expressing a preference for one or the other?
Oh, I did, B, a
B.
B, but the question here though is, what exactly is going to happen to that space that is now presently used as storage? That they were talking about possibly, putting the town hall in part of that building, and I understand, what the argument is for that. But what's gonna happen to that? Is that gonna be incorporated in any of this at all?
I think the answer is we don't know yet, and we are not there yet.
Okay, so I'm going with A then.
Oh,
I changed my mind.
okay.
I think we're making good progress because I think that's 2 A's and 2 B's, so.
My report card is good, huh?
John, go ahead.
What the comment I'd like to make is that we're focusing on the building, but we also need to focus on the building's relationship to the site, to the playground, to the children, to the exterior. Yes, we're designing a building, but it's in a setting. And on that basis, I will say that option B presents better potential for having windows and visibility to the playground. And, even a patio in that alcove that Steve has already designed, but there, yes, thank you. So, and you could have bigger walkout doors, overhead door, walking out to the playground. So people had weddings, a memorial service. It was a good summer day. You can incorporate the outside more easily at that location. So that's my reason for voting for B, in addition to the fact that it's cheaper.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Okay, so Lynn, you don't have a,
Well, after listening to all this, I'm gonna go with B.
okay.
I want what's behind door B.
There you go.
Okay.
Can I change mine to B, please?
Yes, now we're getting somewhere. All right.
You're nuts here. He passes stuff off his paper like mad.
What I'm trying to do is bring consensus from this group. I'm trying to tease out consensus. So we sort of have a preponderance of votes now, thinking that B maybe makes some sense.
Yeah.
The thing that worries me the most about that is not my design ideas, which are just mine, but Penny's ideas about,
Bookstore.
after we all get done and go away and live our lives, poor Penny is dealing with the decisions we made.
Or whoever.
And I'm exaggerating, and it's a
No, no.
50-year building and whatever, but I think that it's important, if we're starting to lean toward B, which I am okay with doing. I think it's really important if we're gonna do that in good conscience, we have to address her concerns about flow. Basically, flow in one word is what her concern is. This is maybe a bad question to ask you, but could you ever flip the library to this end?
Yeah,
And we can also rebuild the stair that goes to the storage area.
Right.
Leave it in.
The only issue there is it's a little bit of a conflict because I'm taking that space over to expand the women's room. But
Okay, yeah, gotta have bathroom.
it just doesn't seem to me unsolvable. I mean, Kevin, you make a good point, flipping the adult reading room with the with whatever I'm calling the classroom, but I don't know what that does to adjacencies and function and.
But you would have to flip both the children's room and the
Oh,
adult.
right, yep.
Yeah.
okay.
You would have to, flip the building. I think it'd be easier to keep the steps. And
I mean, the good news is that, good or bad news is that when you do get into renovating the building and insulating the outside walls and potentially adjusting the ceiling and mechanical, you're gonna have to clean all those rooms out anyway, so you are kind of starting with a blank slate. It's just where you put the furniture back, which room you put it in.
Good point.
Yeah.
So one thing I guess,
Mhm.
a question I like to ask, and maybe this is mostly for Penny, is, because what I want to model within our committee is consensus decision-making and sort of gracious treatment of minority opinions, which is kind of how we got here.
Mhm.
So how can we, is there a way to make B for you to feel, not just acquiesce and go along with it, but feel really good about it being the best plan? What would you need to see that you can tell us that probably no one else here can tell us?
no, I can live with B. I just can't live with the stairs being that far away from the library. I like the library being far away from the maker space and the music room because it is the quiet corner of the building.
Mhm.
And the children's room and the proximity there, that room is 24 by 24, so that sure, we could flip this building, but it would require
So, Penny,
a
could
lot.
is the thing I have labeled computer room, is it really still a computer room or how is it used?
There's one public computer there, well used. The whole building is wired for Wi-Fi. Most everyone else has their own devices, but that's also our media room. So that is an extension of the library with our DVD, audio book collection, and actually the children's nonfiction is in that room. So yeah, we could move it all down to this end, but then.
Well, what I was wondering was whether or not, if the uses of that room, which is in kind of a windowless space currently and maybe isn't super reliant on outdoor light, given its computers and such, could we use some of that space to put a stair in that goes down to that lower level and keeping that mostly storage there, but then carving
I
out
think,
computer?
why not use the back of the bookshop?
Yeah, or that,
Ah.
yeah, absolutely.
How important is that room? I mean,
Yeah,
we're just
I mean-
selling books in there.
That's right. I see that as less used than the media room.
Good suggestion.
Because, when
about
when there are people on the
Oh, I
public, the
didn't.
one public
I think
computer,
it's a waste
and
of
there is a
space.
lot,
Oh, no,
I
Yeah.
have to, keep an eye on them. I gotta walk by and say, yep, they're not slumped over unconscious in their chair,
Certainly.
actually, I circulate.
Yeah.
Wherever there are people, I'm looking in at them. In the library, I can keep an eye on the skate park and see if anybody's lying unconscious out there. And I've been known to open the window and say, do you need a Band-Aid or an ambulance? Okay, so I see but yeah, I could live with B if there were a closer option to access storage.
You still prefer A, but you could live with B?
I like A, just because it seems like that's the place where it's closer to parking, it's farther from neighbors, it doesn't take more green space away, I like it.
That's where I am too. I'm intuitively, as I look at a site and break it down, I feel like it wants to be there. But I also am, I'm not a resident and I'm trying to facilitate rather than sort of drive it my way. So I'm trying to be persuadable and kind of go with what the group wants to do.
It's
All right, I'll
hard.
go to A. A woman has the right to change her mind.
How many times?
Follow the bouncing ball, right?
Maybe we should do a show of hands. instead of-
I'll leave that up to the chair.
Um,
Just to hear, since we've been coming to the meeting, just to hear our viewpoint.
Think it's fair to, go,
Sure, go ahead.
yeah.
Well, I like A because artistically the building would, well, I think if somebody mentioned in the last meeting, it could be a sausage. If you just add it on to the right-hand side, it just becomes a long building. I think just for putting the other room off to the right makes it a nice building and surroundings. The other thing I'm interested in, and hasn't been mentioned, is light into whichever addition you go with A or B. And I haven't heard anything about that. And my suggestion for the storage, just make the whole basement storage and be done with the basement, and then to make sure that Penny has everything she needs down there.
But then you're talking about creating a full
The
kitchen.
kitchen, but I guess that question is, how big of a kitchen do you need? That's a big kitchen down there, but thinking about that is, I like the idea that you have a flow from the addition, that's the meeting room, that can be other things, onto the same of the center here. And I understand there's expense with, excavation, but when you visually look at the building, A is much nicer.
Well, the one thing that you have been stressing all along is that we do look to being an emergency overnight
Mhm.
shelter, which does require the commercial kitchen and, showers and
Right.
bathrooms, and I don't see that happening anywhere but on the lower level.
So since we've opened up the floor to the public, before we engage in point by point, can we hear from, let's hear from this guy.
I really haven't had a chance to study them and I can't see it very well up there. So is there a handout or
You have mine.
I just look at one? for a
Yeah.
minute?
Sandy, you can go ahead.
I'll be short. I prefer A, for most of the reasons that you say, the center in terms of its location near the library, the current library, and accessibility, and also accessibility to the kitchen.
Thank
A
you.
better accessibility to the kitchen, should there be some kind of an event that would require food. And I know an elevator is expensive, but it would be I think the best thing to do for this building when you're having two layers. I think it was John Coffey last meeting said, trying to integrate the building as much as possible on two levels, which is what we struggled with too in our community. So I think an elevator might be not really a necessity, but something, an investment, for people being able to use the whole building. But other than that, I think is a better choice.
Okay, thank you, Sandy. Sally?
The only thing I wanted to comment on was that, if you continue to insist on using the lower level, you should at least put the shaft in for the elevator.
Yeah, we
Okay,
said that.
and
We
your
talked about
preference
that.
of
Yeah, we
which
said that.
side of the building, the multi-purpose room would be?
I like A to look at, B looks. My building experience is the nearer a square you are, the cheaper it is to do.
Right.
But it's not necessarily the most aesthetic.
You've touched on the debate between developers and architects very, very well.
Well, I've been both for 2 or 3 buildings in
Yeah.
the family.
Well, you got it nailed. I mean, there's a lot of wisdom there that
Mhm.
a lot of people don't have, so.
Linda?
Yeah, I have to go with A for the aesthetics and also for the back and forth with books. And or what storage has to come up and down or whatnot. And I also agree that when you're whether you're doing your own home or whatever, there's always this, you should do it now. If you're opening up the place, do it now. So that's how I feel about the elevator. It's like, I can't get over how many people access this building. But I also can't get over how old
these people are.
We are.
What's by, and the idea that, you need, I don't know, somebody was talking about having a lesser kind of elevator, but I'm going, even that makes me feel a little nervous because you've got this person in a wheelchair going down an elevator with no one with them. If it's too small. So I feel like if we're gonna put this out to our town, we need to know that ADA is absolutely positively been addressed in every way that we can. And that this is why the price of is the price of. It's not entirely because of, oh, we just wanted to look fancy and nice. It's because there's been some serious thought put into what's needed. And I don't think that our population is necessarily getting younger. So having those kinds of safety features in it, I'm also very pleased to see how far it's come. What's going on, that we actually are seeing some actual designs and stuff like that, so that's really cool, but I like A. And
Okay.
mainly it's because of my autistic.
Okay, but would you like to comment?
I would, thanks. I thought that I was all for B until we started talking about the aesthetic appeal of the footprint of A. And while I do like the idea of doorways out to the backyard where the gazebo reception area might be, garden area might be, garden party type of space, I question whether that overrides the point, all the good points of A. And Pennies need to access storage space. One thing that occurred to me in this conversation was I heard someone say, do we need to have all of the bulky storage in the same place as the book storage? And I think that if we can address that, determine how much square feet is appropriate for book storage that's currently downstairs. And by the way, could we bring it upstairs so it's easier access? Maybe not. But certainly separating the bulky equipment, voting booth storage from the book storage seems to me to be a good way to go, because they certainly don't need to be put together.
So which was your final answer?
I think I'm going with A.
Okay.
As long as we maintain, and what Linda and several other people said, as long as we maintain a focus on the ADA elevator, and whether it's just a shaft now, but that we definitely plan on putting that in, and providing for our older population, which I think is, we cannot overlook the fact that majority of the people that use this building I'm seeing are on the side of middle age. You know what I mean? We're all getting older, and I think we need to be able to access the two levels. It's a 2-level building. We need to be able to access. And what I keep thinking is, well, if somebody is upstairs and something's happening downstairs, what is going to be the deciding factor? Whether they go out the door to their car or whether they join the group because they can get down to the group via an elevator. And I think that the elevator is the obvious answer.
John, you've had 5 minutes to assimilate all the stuff and make a flawless conclusion. What do you think?
I was gonna say, I just truly haven't had enough time to think about it. I would need to study it and think about it more before I could even possibly put forth an opinion that's based on anything but just sort of an initial reaction.
Okay, fair.
I will say, I do think the elevator is critical.
Okay.
I think we have an obligation, if we don't have a legal obligation, we have a moral obligation to make this building fully accessible.
I want to mention, I'm redeveloping right now the old Brunswick Fire Station, which is behind the Main Street block in town. And we are putting in a brewery and 5 apartments upstairs, and we've got a bunch of different sources of financing to do it, but one of the sources is a CDBG Community Development Block Grant, which is allocated. Well, it's allocated by the county in Cumberland County's case, but most places are allocated by the state, to places like South Thompson. And this is a grant specifically for an elevator. It's an accessibility grant, which wouldn't necessarily exist for whatever else we want to do in there. It's literally for the elevator. So that accessibility does have its own little sources of financing. I'm not suggesting that we're gonna get a free elevator and therefore we should go crazy with elevators, but, that's just
So, I,
CDB, redevelopment,
Block grant.
yeah, yeah.
Community
oh,
development block.
I also had a bit of an epiphany while everybody was talking here about the elevator, and I'm sure a community, such as yours, small community in Maine, prefers not to have the government tell you what to do, but another approach with the elevator is the one thing we can't escape is this project, when it gets constructed, will go to the state fire marshal, and it will have an ADA review. And we have enough on paper now that I could go to the fire marshal and ask, explain the scenario of this building and how it functions, and whether or not he, what his opinion is. And he may just say, absolutely, it's a public facility. I don't care how it functions with things downstairs being separate from upstairs. You have to have an elevator, and then it's decided for us, and none of us have to worry about it anymore.
I think that's how it's going to be, truly.
So you had a hand up.
I just want to bring up some practical points. Yes, an elevator is a great idea, but it's gonna be expensive. I mean, and it needs to be maintained. The other issue is, Penny's the librarian right now, but we're talking down the road here. So we have to think about this in the long term. What's working for her right now, she's making work, and she's making work with as many volunteers as she can get, but a lot of times she's here alone, which isn't a good situation. I mean, you really shouldn't just have one person in this building, especially when there's all this stuff going on. So in the future, and there's no cleaners, there's no maintenance. We don't have, we've got to think about this in the future. So these are just practical things.
Can you put a finer point on that of what it supports, A or B, or elevator or no elevator?
Well, it's obvious we need an elevator. I mean, a big one like they've got in Rockland, I think I don't know how are gonna be able to afford that. The small one you were talking about is a great idea.
Well, it's Steve's idea, not
Well,
mine.
whatever, whoever brought it up, but I'm just looking down the road at how many people it's gonna take to maintain this building. We need to think about that in addition to all this stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a big point, but I need to keep us focused on A and B.
So, well, I'm still for B and.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay, so.
we have to have an
so we've
elevator,
heard
then-
from the public, we've done that, and now we're kind of pulling back to the committee. I think our job as a committee is to listen to one second,
Okay.
Michael, is to listen to the public, but we are the ones who are sort of voting or trying to decide, and so I don't think we should count those as votes necessarily for A, even though everyone liked A. But I think there was some smart things said and some good points made, and we should listen. So now, let me go back to Michael, who had his hand up.
If
Go
we
ahead.
need an elevator, is there a significant difference in either placement or cost, whether it goes in A or B?
Yes.
I don't think so.
I don't think so, really. Not, I think in the last scheme, there was a huge difference. Because A was at a different grade. But now that A is on the same grade, I think you kind of have more of a 6 of one, half dozen of the other scenario. Maybe even a little less excavation for the elevator on A. But I don't think it's a driver anymore. Steve, do you?
No, I don't.
Got a question?
Paul, I hear you.
Yeah, can I ask a question, Penny?
You've been here this
Yeah,
whole time?
he has.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, Paul.
Wow, I didn't know.
You're
Go
not
ahead.
showing up unless they have participants up, so.
Member of the public.
Just
But yeah,
on,
you're.
on option B, why is there the, because I don't have the plans in front of me, why is there a offset and stairwell? Is that going down to the lower level?
Yeah,
Why?
because taking out the other there as
The
well.
other, the other stair doesn't, I mean, the other stair could be rebuilt to meet, accessibility, not accessibility, exiting requirements, but it also is in the way of expanding the women's bathroom, which allows us to not have to build a new bathroom, to serve.
Okay.
Which is actually room, but that's all right, we know.
Okay, I mean, that's a legitimate point. Yeah, go ahead.
Paul, did you have
I got pages of notes, sure. I think it's easier for me to write it up and submit it to the committee than to try to do it verbally. But let me just say, I mean, I want to go back to the basics, which I unfortunately tend to do. This started 5 years ago in 2019 with replacing the current building with a 4,600 square foot building for $1.4 million. In 2022, it went to a 6,600 square foot building at 3.6 million. It's now in 2024, a 12,800 square foot building plus either 2,100 or 3,000 square feet. We're into 15,000 square feet for a town of 1,600 people. We're probably at I mean, renovate the building, sure, maybe $1 million, maybe more. Build the addition. We're looking at, again, $2 or $3 million. We're looking at a $4 or $5 million project, and we're not being realistic. And what we're doing, I mean, I'm glad I think it shows option B because you got structural requirements to put a meeting room above grade with footings. You can pour a slab and have the meeting room in option B. So it's a lot less expensive. I think $250,000 is probably what it is. I mean, there's no structural steel that's needed. There's no foundation that's needed. I just think that we need to get back to why one of the reasons I think the town voted to renovate the building is because people don't want to pay $4,800 each for the 1,600 people to pay $3.6 million when everybody's on marginal incomes. So I think it's wonderful that we've gone down the road we have. I think it's Steve, it's not Scott. I'd written and said, put yourself in a position of a town resident with an annual income of $55,000. And how much more can you afford for these niceties? And then put yourself in that position and figure, we want as much as we can get for what we can afford. And it's nice architecture, but I don't think it'll happen again. It's just too much money for our town. And that's
the cost or the operating cost, Paul?
Oh, well, I mean, and the elevator thing is another thing. That's an operating cost. It compared to a $3 or $4 million budget, $175,000 for an elevator is not unreasonable. But if you do it in phases, which you talked about earlier, you can do it in a renovation phase and an addition phase. And the money that you expend on ADA improvements only has to be 20% of the budget of that particular addition. And you're going to put $60,000 to $100,000 in the renovation of the existing building for ADA. So one of the things to get away from the elevator is and an elevator may not be that bad an idea, but you certainly don't need an elevator if you put the meeting room on grade with the current building with nothing under it but concrete and earth. You don't have any structural requirements there. You don't need to go access the basement from that building, from that addition. And you're just saving a ton of money going with option B, putting it on grade, not accessing the basement. And that's just from a practical point of view,
Yeah, I think that's all correct. I'm just not, I think on the one hand, Paul, you said a few things in there. One of them was kind of leaning toward, don't build an addition at all, the thing's getting too big.
Oh, phase two. Yeah.
I think that our charge as a committee was to figure out how to best save the building and build a new addition.
Okay. I didn't full that as the full, I think we agreed we would look at it, and I think it's a good idea. But we gotta.
I'm not afraid to speak about the politics, and because I don't live here and I don't care. But I think that I think sort of the grand bargain that allows us to all be in the table here and be relatively civil with each other is the idea that everybody's kind of getting something that they want.
Oh, absolutely. But I mean, it's gonna take a couple of years to raise the money anyway. So if you renovate with whatever you raise first, and you keep raising the money, then right after the renovation, the addition could be put on. And it gives more time to generate money either from taxes or from fundraising. So I'm a proponent of an addition. And then let's go back to the addition. We're looking at 2,100. Well, that's for the town offices. You're looking for 30 something. I can't read it. They spent 2 years on the previous committee coming up with a 35 by 51 foot room. Why are we going over 1,950 square feet?
Well, I think we still have to optimize what's actually we propose would be being built. But right now, we're going to be in an infinite feedback loop of meetings if we don't decide A or B. So I think that's what we're trying to do today.
Yeah. Then B is, I mean, I don't know where the final votes came down, but B would be the logical choice with modification.
We don't have final votes. We were just in the limit because going too fast.
The consensus. What was the consensus?
We were starting to get to a consensus, then we opened it up to the public, and now I'm trying to bring it back to the committee, which has taken about 5 minutes, so.
Okay, go ahead. No, I'm good with it. I expressed that, but I will give a write-up.
Okay, all right. So what we're trying to do, I think before we were starting to lean towards some consensus around B, and could that work if we did certain things, and then we had sort of a shift within the committee toward A, which sort of got piled on by the public who kind of also liked A. But I think as a committee, we need to bring it back in, and I just like to go around one more time. John, I assume you're still a proponent of B. I don't have not heard that change.
I'm a proponent of B for simplicity, for access to the outdoors, and for cost.
Okay, and Penny, are you a proponent still of A?
A would be my preference.
Okay. Candace, you want us to come back to you?
Yes, please.
Okay, anyone else you still would be?
Mhm.
Okay,
B.
Final
My
answer?
final.
You want-
Final
Sure you don't want to phone a friend?
That's an idea.
Okay.
Okay,
All right, how about over here?
A.
A. Okay, Michael,
My preference is still B.
Candace,
B.
Kevin?
that's 5 for B. I mean,
And I'm fine with that.
I'm sort of on the A. I believe in A still, but I think B is workable, and I think John and Paul and Ringo and George are generally correct about the cost being lower and it being a more implementable plan. I think we do make some aesthetic sacrifices, which I think the public expressed fairly eloquently, and which I share. But I think that we do run the risk if we design the perfect building of you know, coming up with a $7 million budget and a bunch of I told you so's from folks, which is the last thing that we want, so.
Yeah, to raise
Um,
taxes for this would not be good.
I am
We have an
persuadable,
elevator and staff.
I am persuadable that we can go forward with B. It's
You
not
wanna
my
raise that?
preference, but I'm persuaded and I will work hard to try to implement B until, you know, as far as we can go. But we have the A votes were Penny and me, and who's the other A?
Marcia.
Yeah, so, can we as A voters, can we work with B, and do we think that can,
Absolutely, especially when somebody said, look, we could flip the library. And I think this room could become the half children's room and half teen room. Because that's something we haven't put on here.
Mhm.
So then the present library becomes what this room is. I mean, I think that flipping, I know that's not exactly to point, but I think it makes B more acceptable.
and is the folks that all voted B, are you generally of the mind that because it's simpler and less expensive, is that generally the thought?
Mhm.
Or are there other thoughts that B is the best?
I
No,
just think it flows better. And I
Okay.
mean, I understand that it's gonna take some green space but I just think it'll work better.
Okay. Other thoughts on B?
I just have one quick question too, is that, and I believe that it's already been addressed again. About putting building a shaft at some point,
Yeah, I think that applies to both plans.
Yeah.
I
both
think we-
plans, that's what I wanted to know, yes, thank you,
All
so,
right, so
yes.
I think we've kind of heard from everyone, and Penny, I want you to kind of have the last word, because we're about to sort of vote against your
Yeah,
idea.
if, yeah, and it looks like B is the more logical conclusion. I could fully support that, but would prefer that the kitchenette was reduced to basically a galley sink,
Mhm.
stove, whatever, microwave. And that the stairs and perhaps the elevator were more centrally
Centrally located.
located within the building. And I don't really wanna change the library to this end where it's closer to the playground. I
It
think
works
we
very
lose
well
our-
there and it's
our
quiet.
quiet
Yeah.
zone. And also I would like to see an exit facing the playground.
Mhm.
Rather than now you would have to go, you know, through, I like an exit. You know, go out, turn left and down the steps and you're in the playground there, or down the ramp, whatever. Because I think we're making it a lot longer to get there, and this store gets used a lot, the kids play out here. And run in and out, but I think it's very workable and possibly a little smaller if we could relocate the elevator shaft and stairs to a different location within the building, closer to the library, preferably.
Okay,
Little bit,
so.
sorry.
So, okay, so I think we have come to a consensus within the committee on B. But I think it was close enough and fine enough that I think we want to proceed cautiously. So, members of the public, are you gonna walk out of here thinking those idiots got it wrong? Or are you gonna walk out of here thinking, well, they didn't go the way we wanted, but they had a process and we kind of respect it, or a little bit of both?
The latter. No, it's fine. It's just, it's practicality and it's not my favorite thing. I've drawn up my favorite thing, but you gotta compromise.
Yeah.
Sandy? I can hear what you
Oh,
were
what I
saying.
said, no,
Yeah.
I just think the discussion has been really helpful, and you can clarify where the pluses and minuses are very easily, so.
Any other final?
John?
I agree to a lot of pluses and minuses, even the few minutes that I had to look at it, but just one thing I wanted to say before we leave here, I heard discussion about tax dollars for capital expense, and my understanding from the beginning, this has always been if we can raise the money from grants and donations.
You didn't hear any of that from anyone on the committee?
No, Lynn
No,
said it.
but I heard it Yeah, I heard it, a couple of people, one person and mentioned it, and another, it doesn't matter who mentioned it.
Yeah.
People watch these, it gets around, people can't do who said what.
Yeah.
So to my knowledge, that hasn't changed.
I've never
And,
assumed
no,
that there'd
I
be
just
any
wanna-
tax
I just
impact at
wanna
all.
make
I
that
gotta
clear that,
explain that to my mother, you know?
Yeah.
I wanna make that clear that the premise has been all along that the capital cost would not involve any local tax dollars
That's,
being
that's
raised.
precisely why I asked Paul the question, are you talking about
Okay.
capital or operating?
Okay.
Because I was trying to get at that
Yeah.
point, because my assumption was we're not.
Right.
Well,
Right.
let me, Kevin, let me just say that, you know, there will be a small component that has to be raised outside, and whether that's done by taxes, the town may, in fact, want to contribute, have a higher tax rate to put that 10 or 20% in. But it's up to us to raise it, and that's what we'll have to do. But it is a possibility in most towns. The towns do contribute to a program.
I think we have to channel George Bush Senior here when we say, read my lips, no new taxes, but then no, actually,
I live in New Hampshire, and it,
this is what he did. So,
Jesus,
bring
that up.
okay, so, I think we, on the committee, I think we, maybe are ready to entertain a motion on a preferred option.
I move that we proceed with option B.
I second.
All right, and is there any further discussion?
We discussed a lot.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye. Yes.
All right, it's unanimous. Okay, so I think we've done a lot of work tonight. There's a lot of work left to go. I think perhaps the elevator, no elevator thing is something that can be talked about maybe in the next phase of design. I think it's important. I think it's a big question. I'm not sure it's a question for tonight. We've been at this now for 2 hours.
Time to go home. I gotta feed my kids.
So congratulations. I think you guys have done a lot of good work, and I'm almost glad it didn't go my way. I
Yeah,
think it's
I'm happy.
because I think it's important to demonstrate that it's okay to not get it your way and still be able to work together. I'm glad we had a unanimous vote. I think that's great. So congratulations to all of you. So with that, I'd like to hand it back to the chair for any further zipping through of,
Well, I wonder if we should table the discussion of the focus group report because it's
Yes.
been a long.
Yeah.
so moved.
Second.
Right? So, yeah,
Meeting, can we have, plans for the public so we can look at them?
I don't think we're there yet.
I think we'll have plans for the public at some point in the not too distant future.
Even if we hand it back, but it's pretty hard to see that, that's all. So we
Yeah.
follow it. Just and if you want us, we can hand them right back to you at the end of the meeting.
No, it's not that they're
Yeah.
secret. It's that we want to get our thinking done before we open it up.
Yeah.
You know, and I think we're near there, but we're not quite there yet. So appreciate
That's when you
it.
get with the floor plan.
Yeah.
and How it's moved.
Yeah, I think you're right. Okay, so table 6.
I think that we can schedule the next meeting.
Okay, items for next agenda, just real quick. I know Steve has put in a lot of time and effort, and we've made a big decision on a chunk of his work, and I know he is probably anxious to, although he loves us and likes us, he's probably anxious to finish this assignment and get an attaboy and get paid.
Yeah.
So I think that the next things to talk about would probably be the rest of your scope, Steve, in terms of energy efficiency, insulation, maybe shift to the existing building a little bit, and then with some thought about how option B plays into those things, particularly with regard to maybe elevator siting, shaft siting, and maybe a month from now, we try to come back with maybe even those elevations that we talked about in the contract, and maybe try to put a little bit of a bow on your work maybe a month from now. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess the closing comment I wanted to make for those that think that A is the, or B is the inferior option relative to A in terms of design and potential aesthetics. I want to assure you that I'm pretty confident that I can make the option B quite palatable and something that you guys are all proud of. So I'm not too worried about that. I agree with what you just said, Kevin, but I do think we probably should as a part of that process, I should do another refinement of option B, just to try to address some of the kind of main issues, especially with Peggy and the stair and elevator being key. I said Peggy again, didn't I? Penny.
Yes.
Sorry. I also noticed, Penny, that I'm spelling your name wrong in the email, so eventually I'll get that right too. So anyway, yeah, I don't want to just totally drop the ball on that, but I think you're right. Basically, we need to also, start focusing on the existing building.
So my sense is that coming back in 2 weeks is not enough time to have all that stuff raked together. I feel like we go back to a monthly to try to get give you as much time as possible now that your lens is a little wider, and frankly, the tasks are a little bit different. When we think about our values and electrical service sizes and roof structure and that sort of thing.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. So I think then our scheduling our next meeting is really talking about maybe a month from now. If that
Okay.
works for folks.
Anyone looking at a calendar?
You wanna go before Thanksgiving or after?
Well, Thanksgiving's late.
Yeah.
28,
Before.
So
yeah.
Yeah, it's just a month.
So
June,
So
early
Tuesday
December.
before?
I would love to sneak it in before, but I defer to the architect on what makes sense.
You wanna do the 19th?
No, but if we're doing Tuesdays, that would be the 26th, well, month, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm probably,
Yeah, people travel though. I mean, that's why I was choosing the week before.
all right.
Will probably conflict with a select board meeting too.
You wanna push it to the first week of December then?
I
Yeah,
just
Yeah.
19th?
26th.
heard or something seems good to me.
Okay, what's
December
Tuesday the
3rd.
3rd.
December 3rd?
December 3rd is a Tuesday. Oh, wait, today's Tuesday. So yeah, we've been doing Tuesdays.
Does that, work generally for folks?
Well,
I'm
if there's a selectmen's meeting, no.
Well, there's not.
Well, if
there's
they're
not.
meeting the 26th, then they won't, they won't be meeting. the
No, I
third,
think that we generally meet the second and fourth.
fourth.
I
So-
thought someone mentioned the 26th. And
But if we
Zoom-
take the 31st, you guys can work around
Right,
us.
and the issue is Zoom. 'cause
Actually,
you want it.
If
Your
we-
meeting doesn't start for an
On
hour.
the 26th, I'm gonna be in the
Oh.
deserts in Utah, so I
Okay,
have
good.
questionable service.
And I assume for 3 o'clock again for Steve,
I
or,
kinda like the 3 o'clock
Yeah.
for Steve.
Yeah,
because
me
it also-
too.
Great.
all
Excellent.
right. So even if there is a select board meeting,
We'll be out of here.
it'll be
All right, so December 3rd,
at 3 on Tuesday.
Okay.
We entertain maybe a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
There we go.
Thanks, everybody. Good job tonight.
Thank
Appreciate it.
you.
Thank you.
Agree.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Although I don't know if
On the
I
way
do it
out.
every minute that I make the motion to adjourn.
No one's gonna look at those stats.
Okay, good.
I did all the tasks you asked me to, John.
All right.
Maureen, thank you. Love your hat.
You can, but it's hard to read.
You're welcome.
That's all right.
Can I email it to you so then you
Yeah.
can blow it up, because I don't know if you can read that print, I couldn't, so I was looking at it. If you open your PDF here, you can blow it up.
No,
enough
I
to
can read it, believe it or not.
All right. Then I will give
Maybe
you,
I won't be able to read the copy.
well, I'll give you this one, John.
Oh, all right, thank you.
I think they're all,
I just can't look at something like that in 5 minutes. And
okay. Let me give you,
Yeah, what I was gonna say I forgot to say was that as we move forward, I think what we wanna do, even though we're not necessarily beholden to the selectmen, I think it makes a ton of sense for us to not fly in the face of the selectmen, you know?
Yeah.
So I think we would like to, at some point, we were interested in your all's opinion.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the previous rendition of this committee came a couple of times and updated us at a meeting, and that also captures a different segment of the public too.
Yeah,
so.
I think we're nearing being ready for that. I think before we go out and have design charrettes with everybody, I think we
Yeah.
wanna go to
Yeah.
you and talk to you about it.
Yeah, so maybe even our second meeting, or you're not gonna be here. But,
I think after December 3rd, I think we're gonna have a piece of
Okay.
paper with a plan on it that we're gonna wanna come in and. show you.
if you're, right?
Yeah.
Is your next lesson?
What are you doing in Utah?
Going to Arches and Canyonlands and,
Usually you're right about
I know.
Your whole family?
Three of us, the other one's still in college, but,
Oh.
yeah.
Well,
All right, John, have a good one.
Yep, take care. Thank you. Very good meeting.
Yeah, congratulations.
Oh, and to you. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right, good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thanks,
Kevin.
Comment.
Drive safe.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. That went well. Then we're gonna go home.
Still wanna slap more.
Oh,
Did you hear her?
Yeah. What'd she say?
Oh, she's sitting here talking about candidates not paying attention, when what she did last week was even friggin' worse.